For this may the curse of the Great Spirit rest upon this land. May it be blighted by nature, may even be blighted in its hopes. May the strength of its people be paralyzed by the stain of our blood. And that is how that story ends.
Well, that sounds like it could rip a hole through dimensions.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fictitious Dark, where we explore the line between the truth and the fictitious. I'm Josiah, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Rick.
I'm Brandon.
And today we are doing a very special episode for a very special celebration this year. It happens every September 21st and 22nd in this great country of ours, the Mothman Festival. And so we thought it would be perfect if we did a segment on Mothman for you all.
It's been long coming.
Yeah. I think this was actually like one of the first episodes that we planned on doing back when we started talking. And I think we all made the decision, like, we got to wait till it's Mothman week.
Yeah, so this one has literally been probably about 6 months in the making, almost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it ties in. I always make a reference whenever it's applicable, but this ties back into the Aliens episode. So,
Yep.
If you want a primer to some of the stuff we'll be talking about today, this will be a pseudo sequel to that. But yeah, Mothman. Like, let's jump right into Mothman. I want to know what you guys knew about Mothman before doing any research for this, like your previous experience with it.
I think my previous experience has to do with just the pictures, because I remember when I was in high school when the movie came out, because I'm an old man, and all my friends were talking about the Mothman prophecies of it being scary, and I had yet to grow a pair to watch any horror movies, so I was the type of person that always read, synopsis and spoilers and seeing what they were about. And so I remember looking up pictures, and it just like freaked me out. And my friends would always talk about how cool Indrid Cold was, and his voice and everything like that. And so I just literally watched Mothman Prophecies for the first time yesterday. And so when it came to hearing his voice, I thought it was going to be like a deep, almost like demonic voice, because that's what's always been in my head for the last like 20 years. And when it was more electronic, more like softer, it was like mind blowing. I was like, whoa, it's so much different than I expected. So I knew very, very little of pretty much Point Pleasant, Mothman, the way the red eyes on the chest with the wings. I remember Point Pleasant and the whole prediction of doom type of stuff, but that's pretty much it that I knew.
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure literally the Mothman Prophecies film was my very first introduction, because I saw that movie when I was a kid. I really don't remember how old I was, nor really much about the film. I just remember when it gets to the bridge scene and you're like, whoa, like, and all that stuff. But yeah, and then like I was like, wait, this is real? What do you mean this is real? Like, and then, I just had always heard those little things and whatnot. Never really knew too much about Mothman. It just, then I learned about Bigfoot mostly when I was growing up, and then kind of learned about Mothman a little bit more simply because of the world of cryptids. But yeah, Mothman's always been kind of just there in the background, but not really understanding too much throughout growing up and everything.
Yep.
For me, it does come back to Mothman Prophecies. My mom was a big Richard Gere fan, so it was easy to kind of wiggle that one in. But I forget if I encountered the Mothman as like a portent of doom before I saw the movie, but definitely that movie was the primary exposure, I think, for a lot of people. But of course, the image of Mothman, in my opinion, it's one of the most iconic cryptid images. The glowing red eyes, the silhouette like a like a dark angel, this kind of demonic force. Although when I was younger, I was very opinionated about this. I thought, like, why is he called Mothman? He looks more like an owl. Why is it not Owlman? Moths, yes, they have like the bulbous eyes, but it's very rarely kind of a shine to it. It's more, refracted with insect eyes. So to me, it always more felt like an owl, and the way it would swoop down and maybe grab prey. And but yeah, this Mothman is the portent of doom, and that seems to be the kind of thing that elevates Mothman from, in a similar way to the Rake. The Rake was something where, yeah, it's like this kind of gangly Wendigo like monster that's going to tear you apart, but it whispers these prophecies, or it's this kind of signifier of dark things to come. So that to me is kind of what stuck with me about the Mothman, is people were very convinced that this disaster was foretold by the appearances of this thing. And that's really kind of, from what I remember, because again, I'm going to have Rick, I want you to kind of go into it a little bit. From what I remember of the movie, Mothman is not really the main focus. It's almost like the idea of the Mothman is this kind of paranoid presence that exists within this place, but maybe foretells things in many different places and maybe takes different forms. But really, this podcast, it's not just about Mothman, because what I had forgotten is that a huge part of the lore and a huge big piece of this whole puzzle is the being known as Indrid Cold. And that is really where almost more of the lore occurs, and Mothman is like this phantom, while Indrid Cold is the thing actually talking to people,
Yeah, and he's like the one thing that we're able to communicate with, say, like, the beast, as people call it. And he's like the one that like is almost like he kind of reminds me of the Dennis Hopper character from Apocalypse Now. He's like does all the speaking for Colonel Kurtz, and so that's what it reminds me of. The Grinning Man, or Indrid Cold as they call him. He's doing like all the talking for the Mothman, and this is where some people like to also say that he might be someone that is trying to give us a warning before something catastrophic happens, or he's deeming this person that he's talking to a messenger to tell people what's going on. And that's kind of almost in a sense what happens in the movie, but of course they Hollywood it up and they make it almost like a story for Richard Gere's character to save number 37, and so his character in the Hollywood version is there to save the sheriff that shouldn't die. But in the movie they have also some things of him talking to people, like Gordon, and the author, what was his name? It was backwards, Dr. Leek.
Yeah, Keel. Yeah,
because Keel's the real life one, but Leek, and they both had run-ins with his Indrid Cold, and both gave him a message about how bad things would happen, whereas they both weren't taken serious. And I believe Richard Gere's character got the wrong message in the movie and thought it was going to be something else, but it ended up being the famous bridge collapse, in the lore. But in 2022 or 2002, not 1967.
Which, not to date this, but being in the Snohomish County area currently, the current work they're doing on the bridge, part of that might have resulted from the fact that when that bridge collapsed, they had a congressional thing put through that there needs to be more routine inspections of these bridges, because you need to keep up on that or they will collapse that. So it is kind of interesting.
And I think the original bridge, if we go back to talking about Point Pleasant, and in real life, not in the movie, the original bridge was made, I think it was like 1925. So it was made for Model Ts and horse and buggies and things that weren't weighing a couple of tons and weighing, probably under a ton at that point. So having a bunch of cars, parked on the bridge, it's not used to the stress of all that weight, and I could see it collapsing. So maybe there might be a more realistic, literal take to maybe why the bridge broke, but maybe Mothman, Indrid Cold was trying to warn us about that because you know, at least in the movie, he's all knowing. He knows exactly what's going on.
Well, that raises an interesting point because I find with Mothman and Injured Cold, a lot of UFO and extraterrestrial stuff gets brought in. Are we not sure that maybe the Mothman is the true form of this entity and Injured Cold is like a skin suit that it enters,
Hmm.
and they are one and the same, perhaps?
Yeah, maybe he's like some kind of shapeshifter, or dare we say, skinwalker? But let's not talk about that
Oh
word.
no!
Or
Oh
shapeshifter,
no! Once again, everything's a skinwalker.
right?
Ah.
But
The shape, yeah.
maybe you're right. Maybe
Oh,
he's a
man.
shapeshifter. I know a lot of the stuff. Talks about him being from a different galaxy. He
Mhm.
has told people is from, I think, Galaxy Loris, or I can't remember what the.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people I could piss off by putting that in the thumbnail? Is Mothman a skinwalker?
Too many.
Yeah.
It'd be too fun.
Could one of you take I mean, maybe Rick, I don't know. Give us a description. Who is Indrid Cold? Cold, whatever. I'm a little fuzzy. I remember a little bit. I saw a little bit of things, but give us a description. Who is this person? What's their deal? What's this name?
So,
where does it come from?
Indrid Cold is also known as the Green Man because he, depending on which one of the stories you go with, he's a humanoid-like character who sometimes has hair, sometimes doesn't, sometimes has a nose, sometimes doesn't. But he has a humanoid face, but he always has a grin. He wears reflected like clothing, and I think in the first story he's wearing reflective green, and his
Yeah.
bottoms are a little bit lighter, whereas in the second and third story he's wearing more of a bluish color. But I can't remember exactly what year it was, but he was encountered by Woodrow Derenberger, and where Woodrow found him was he saw like this almost chimney like spaceship that crashed, and out came the character, and Indrid Cold came out and talked to him, but he didn't talk to him with his mouth or anything. He kept his grin the whole time and talked everything through telepathy. And I can't remember, I'm trying to find it right now, but I believe he told him where he was from. So yeah, I have it right here. It was in 1966, and this was before any of the Point Pleasant stuff, if I remember right. A kerosene lamp chimney is what he explained it to look like, and he looked like a perfectly natural and normal human being. His face looked like he had a good tan, a deep suntan. He was not too dark. It was like if he had been in the sun a lot and had a good tan. His hair was combed straight back. It was dark brown. He had a good thick head of hair. His eyebrows, features were normal. And he said he didn't believe that he looked any different from any man that he would meet on the street. But he had a large grin and kept his arms folded under his pits. And he spoke to him telepathically, and his smile never moved. He asked him to roll down his window on the right side of the truck, and this man stood there and he asked me what I was called. I knew he meant my name. I told him my name. He said, "Why are you frightened?" He said, "Don't be frightened. We wish you no harm. We mean you no harm. We wish you only happiness." So I told him my name, and my name, he said, was Cold. Indrid Cold. So he busted right out the James Bond.
He did.
He was a big fan of Dr. No at the
Yeah.
time.
So isn't like, because this particular story I do recall hearing, I actually listened to a thing talking about this pretty recently. However, like this was like a legit thing, and he went to, was it a newspaper? He wrote a book. What was, how did he get this out to the public again?
I think let's see if I can find it.
the book came later. The Mothman Prophecies book
It's
came
by
out
a
in
different
70.
guy.
It came
So
out in 75. So that's like a whole,
yeah.
you know.
So but
Oh, he
according
was interviewed on live TV.
that's right, yeah.
Okay.
But so what's the connection with Mothman with this? Because if with everything with Indrid that I've done research and listened to about him, I've never mentioned Mothman. And then I haven't watched the movie, but I was listening to plenty of different Mothman things. So what is the connection between Mothman and Indrid Cold?
I think it's the whole idea that it was something that happened, and then a year later is when we get the Mothman sightings, and I
Okay.
believe where they saw Indrid Cold, who I think it was like an hour out of Point Pleasant, if I remember right. I'm trying to read through.
It's kind of one of those things where, you know, these things are occurring in this area,
Yeah,
and they're kind of connected. Um, in my research, yeah, it's not like Indrid Cold ever says a figure will appear to foreshadow your doom, as far as I know.
It's more so just about it being the same location.
yeah, and Keel connected the two, linked the two, Cold and Mothman together.
Okay.
And so technically it was the book and probably the movie, which is why we're seeing the two lumped together.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
And of course, you know, because in the classic extraterrestrial stories, you have the alien and then you have the man in black,
Mm-hmm.
who will figure who will kind of screen people or interrogate people or tell people you didn't see anything or say something cryptic. So it seems to be following that pattern, that archetype. Indrid Cold, though, seems to have come from a spaceship himself
Mhm.
in the original story.
And the galaxy is from Lanulos, 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 and there's like another
Rick, remind
thing
me,
I was reading.
in the movie, we don't ever see Cold, right?
We see his silhouette because he comes and talks to Gordon.
Okay, yeah.
Because Gordon is at the cement factory,
Oh, okay.
and he's kind of sees, like, the whole red eyes, and it flies over to him, and then he comes out walking out of the factory, and then that's when he talks to him. We never see the green man or anything like that. We just see the silhouette.
Gotcha.
So also with Mothman, there's a bunch of different not to change the subject, but just to go in further with the lore. There's a bunch of different, like, ideas of what the Mothman could be. So we've talked about one, alien. The second one that a lot of people talk about too is there's a munitions plant there, and they believe that the Mothman might be one of these Starkbill storks, or what are they called? I am horrible with names.
Sandhill cranes.
Sandhill cranes. Thank you.
He's a stork.
That-
He's bringing little moth babies.
So a lot of people believe that's a sandhill crane that has been somehow mutated by all the waste from the munitions plant that was there. As you can see, if you look up a picture of the sandhill crane, they do have red eyes, and a lot of animals in the dark, if you shine a light or reflective, they do have reflective red lights. I think owls are ones that have that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you guys think about this? Do you think this is a little bit more of a...
It's funny because
logical?
you mentioned before the podcast Jersey Devil, and the Jersey Devil, one of the suggestions is that it is a sandhill crane that is screeching as it flies by.
Yeah.
So it's funny that this animal seems to be. I mean, it sounds really scary if you had that fly past you at night, you would start seeing.
Oh yeah. So that is actually like one thing as far as Jersey Devil and Mothman have a lot in common in the fact
Hmm.
of just how they became a thing, because it's just kind of like it got out there, this story of this thing, and then all of a sudden everybody started seeing it. Oh, I saw this and yada yada. Who knows if people are making stuff up? Who knows if they're actually seeing something? But either way, they saw something, and then they're associating it with whatever story they heard. And if we didn't already touch, I feel like we may have not really touched on it because everybody kind of knows what Mothman is. Anyone who might not exactly understand what Mothman is, flying bird man, pretty much, red glowing eyes, dark black figure, pretty much, and then usually sightings start happening before a disaster happens. The big
Hmm.
bridge collapse thing and whatnot. People saw it before that happened, and yada yada. So then it became the legend of people seeing it and thinking that he's an omen of disasters and terrible things to come.
Yeah.
So, but then it just kind of became a thing of like, it's cool. It's cool to see the Mothman and whatnot, which obviously then you get into the dangerous territory of people lying about it because it's exciting. But yeah, so that is very interesting. And I guarantee the whole crane thing is like at least one story or something, or maybe a couple of somebody thinks they saw it. Could be very well be that, you know.
Yeah. Um. Also, with the whole idea of the sandhill crane being, uh, possibly the chupacabra and the Mothman. Um, both states are kind of close to each other, where, you know, it could be a thing. And also,
Flying
both
back and forth.
states. Go ahead.
No, I was saying flying back and forth.
Yeah, and both states also have, like, where the town's located. Both places are a smaller community. It's not in a big, residential area. Do you think that it could be possibly this same idea that we talked about beforehand with, the Jersey Devil, that this could be this town making money, but using it as a place for tourism to bring people in to make money, so poor town could survive? Could that be?
Anytime you take a cynical mindset, why does the newspaper publish the story? Because they know people are going to read it.
Exactly.
People do suggest this, but when it's something like this, where it's literally just an eyewitness story, no evidence, they publish it because they know people are going to be intrigued by it. People are going to want to read it. People are going to buy the newspaper. People are going to talk about it.
Mhm.
So that always could be the thing, is that this gets propagated by that when there's no, hard evidence. So that's always a possibility. Salem, the real town, is not Salem, the tourist town. Not
Yeah.
where the original Salem was. The Salem that is now exists for the witch trials. It's where everyone goes, and the real town is elsewhere. So they push it all there, and I'm sure the county makes some money from it that goes back into them. So that's always a possibility, of course.
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think is, like, your theory on it? Your possible, your idea of what literally is happening with the Mothman?
I will say, because I always got to bring this in if Brandon doesn't. We look at medieval demonology. You got Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. Maybe he's not a moth. Maybe he's got the red eyes of a fly, and it's Beelzebub flying around, and he's like a demonic thing. The only reason we call it Mothman is not because there's any specific features. It's because the newspaper took all these stories and just put the label of Mothman. And even on Wikipedia, they're like, yeah, Killer Moth, the Batman villain, was out around this time. And it's so funny.
Yeah.
So the only reason it's Mothman is just because it sounds cool, and that's just what we call it. But there's nothing, if you look at the features, if it is insectoid, there are other insects it could be. Again, as a kid, I thought Owlman. Maybe it's the Flyman. Maybe it is some other.
Maybe it's Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I watched The Fly too, and
That's a good one. Honestly,
I
the fly makes more sense because of the whole eye thing. You can't see
Yeah.
moth's eyes really. I mean, there's the rare like really close picture and whatnot, but it's not like prominent in the way that flies' eyes are.
absolutely.
And
I think the
also
whole
red.
I think the whole idea with like the Mothman is just because of it's a nocturnal animal. Like everybody's
Mhm.
seen it
Yeah.
pretty much. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. Most people have seen it at night, and so I think that was the whole idea behind that. And I agree that Owl Man is a better description of the actual Mothman or what he looks like.
Mhm.
So to counteract what we're going with Mothman theories, how do you guys explain all the different sightings all over the world, not just in Point Pleasant? There's supposedly a Mothman sighting above Chernobyl shortly before it happened. There was a Mothman sighting supposedly in China before it happened, before
For which
a mining collapse, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say before it happened. Well, yeah, that thing
Before
I'm thinking in my head.
China happened.
Or China.
There's one in 9/11 too. There's a Mothman sighting 9/11, 5 days prior to the attack.
Is
And it
that
was the
sorry? Go
first
ahead.
sighting in 31 years.
Is that like so? Is that retrospective stuff where people are like, yeah, I saw that, or like, did this like? There's a legit report that somebody's like, I saw the Mothman, and then it happened. Like, that's the big question when it comes to
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff. And
Definitely, because all I got from what I read is that there's witness reports seeing a large crane-like figure in the vicinity of the towers. But then again, how close is New York to New Jersey? Just right over the river, pretty much.
maybe George W. Bush is the Mothman. I don't know.
Also, in 2007, August 31st, the Mothman was seen above the bridge collapse in Minnesota, the I-35 collapse. 13 people were killed. And to bring it even closer to our timeline, supposedly in 2011 to 2017, there was a bunch of sightings in Chicago. And it was to warn us about Barack Obama. No, just kidding. But,
I was going to say it was to warn us about crime in Chicago.
Yeah, crime in Chicago and everything that Chicago... actually, you know what the big thing is? Probably warn us about the Cubs actually winning the World Series for once. But we're not going to go there. But
let's
so we're getting a bunch of different sightings all over the world. Say world because China and Chernobyl were included. So what do you think the chances are is that we're seeing large crane-like animals that probably populate the area and they fly around, people having this thought of Mothman in their head, and the way that our minds, when we try to look for answers and clues to solve things, we always project what we know. So do you think that these are just other bird-like animals, or an owl even, because owls are pretty dang huge if you see them in up in person? And do you think this is something that like we're just trying to like solve our own little mysteries by projecting Mothman to them because it's something that we see very quickly out of the corner of our eye?
I think psychologically, if we see something that gives us like a primal kind of dread, and then something kind of inexplicable happens, like a tragedy strikes, our minds will want to correlate them to provide meaning, because usually when something is senseless and out of nowhere, we want to like find the meaning behind it. That's why a lot of people, I think I put this out before, a lot of people are into true crime, is they hear these horrible things and they want to like find the meaning, find the reason, find the justifications that led to this horrible thing happening. And so I think that, yeah, psychologically they're gonna remember, oh yeah, I had like that was kind of spooky when I saw that thing flying at night. and then like their bridge collapsed or something, and they're just like, how does this happen? And they start to form the connection on a subconscious level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think that the Mothman could be something that's easily, answered as maybe what the movie says? It's a thing that, it comes from trauma or being spooked, like you said, and to give us that like sense of closure, sense of it's not going to get me. We're like, oh, it's a stork, it's a bird. Is it, or could it be something real? Is what I'm trying to say.
Well, so one thing is all the different ideas of like the idea of seeing Mothman before a tragedy, and like what that means. Is he warning us? Is he yada yada? All those different ideas. All of that does kind of circle back to demonology, especially with the fact of the film having this idea of it being related to trauma. So it's like, also kind of comes back to the idea of the fly, because trauma being this like kind of like this energy that you're giving off, and negative energy that invites these negative spirits. It's like, moth to a flame, a fly coming in, smelling the trauma on you, idea. So whatever the idea is of the supernatural element of Mothman, it always is kind of like an interesting spiritual element, where it's tragedy, death. Is he the Grim Reaper? Or is it just like the negative energy and it's the spirit showing up because of that? And then different traumas and whatnot invite different negative spirits and stuff like that. So every time you get into like that kind of stuff, it just rings to be that kind of category to me.
I know that in Keel's original novel, he was kind of proposing that this is a whole other topic, but ultra terrestrials, aka beings that originate on Earth but maybe from another dimension, they create this psychic connection and phenomena, and they make us see these visions of Mothman and UFOs, and those things don't actually exist, but they create these and for some purpose to either through our trauma or because we're open to it. And we've talked about on this podcast several times, a lot of the times you have to either be open to something or you invite something in, and then it will use what you are seeking. There's the we talked about in the aliens episode, but the whole the whole Satan is an Area 51 thing, and there's actually a C.S. Lewis book. He did this space trilogy, and the third book is all about how there's this scientific organization that is a front. They are being given technology by demons, so it's funny that they're essentially giving us what we want, right? So if you want power, you want technology. If you want an explanation for this tragedy, then something will create this phantom to explain it.
Yeah. You mentioned the word dimension, so now I have an idea. I don't necessarily like 100% believe this, but I think it's an interesting little thought bubble. So the whole Indrid Cold thing. He shows up, and there's that experience, yada yada, in this area. He's from a different galaxy or whatever. And then when it comes to the idea of aliens and space travel and whatnot, there then comes in the aspect of different dimensions. Are they actually like traveling through space, or are they like traveling through dimensions? And Indrid Cold specifically crashed. So let's little idea. He, didn't necessarily purposefully come here, or maybe he did. But either way, he tore a hole through our dimension and crash landed. And simply because that hole was left there, that portal or whatever, then a year later, the Mothman came through it. So it's not that they actually have a connection, it's just that he made the gateway for that entity to then come through.
See, I like that idea because putting aside the movie, again, I don't think there's anything of the Mothman or Indrid Cold saying anything specific about events happening or that specific things were going to, to occur. But yeah, I kind of like that idea. Is that Indrid was almost like this traveler who was peaceful, but he's just unsettling because he's not quite us. But maybe maybe he has the ability to take on the appearance of the local life form. And so he like he said, we mean you no harm. He didn't seem to be overtly malevolent. He just was unsettling. And then yeah, maybe it was just a if he is this traveler, it was a pure accident, and then yeah, but he couldn't get home because his ship was damaged, and then yeah, this other entity comes through, and now it's loose, and maybe it is able to traverse the globe, and it is going around, and for some reason maybe it's drawn to these tragedies because it psychically kind of either causes situations and feeds off the psychic energy from them, or it can kind of precognition type know where these areas are, and so it hangs around them until something has occurred, and then in which case it moves on to another location. That's possible. That's an idea.
And then there's always the idea of time and like it not being a linear thing to some beings and whatnot. So let's say this being came from another dimension, and maybe it's it's there it's kind of drawn to certain energies. Maybe he's a little energy vampire or something like that. And then you have these hot spots, and time is not necessarily linear for this being, so it's just like that's why it's going before the event technically happens or whatever, because it's like it feels the energy or something like that. I don't know, that's just like
going off, we've talked about how like poltergeists and like the strong emotions, the violence, the trauma can almost create these weak spots in our realm. Yeah, perhaps you're right. Maybe you can spots can become pre-haunted. Like if the spirit realm time doesn't exist, then someone could die 100 years from now, but it's so horrible that it ripples backwards, and something is pre-haunted. It's like it's an interesting idea. It's like people, obviously like there's been so much of history that everywhere on the planet, like every spot, somebody has died, probably like almost in every spot on Earth. It's like, but perhaps there's times where you enter places and you're like, I don't quite like this place. Maybe something just hasn't happened yet.
Maybe maybe Mothman is just one of those like what do you call it, the like glider, like with the parachute, but it's like a little like squirrel suit thing.
Oh, the sugar.
Yeah, maybe he's just a guy that died and he's haunting these places, just flying around. and he was doing it at night, and he had some glowy goggles on when he was
yeah, he's gonna die like 300 years from now.
Yeah, he's just flying around.
He's like, God help me!
Help me! He just comes in and phases out, and people are like, "Oh!"
He's just like screaming for help, and they just hear
the Mothman.
It's the Mothman.
Yeah.
All right, I got another theory to propose to you guys now.
Okay.
Another
theory could be that it's a vengeful curse.
Ooh.
Have you guys heard of Chief Cornstalk?
Okay.
Sounds kind of familiar, but not really. No. Do tell.
So in 1777, Chief Cornstalk traveled to a fort in the area. Can you guess what the fort is called?
Fort Moth. No, I'm just kidding. Fort Pleasant.
Point Pleasant.
Oh.
Okay.
And he tried to engage in peace talks with the locals there, which were they were colonists, and they were fighting against the British and the native nations at the time. And Cornstalk wanted to, broker peace between everybody. And he was like, what's it called? Like pushed away. There was no peace, because they didn't want to, align with them or join them. So the colonists, they feared him because he was a skilled fighter and a military genius, supposedly, and respected, and they detained him. 2 days later, Cornstalk's father, or son, visited, and he was also detained. And then a couple days later, 2 men went fishing or hunting for deer. That's what it was right here. Hunting for deer, and one was dead, and the other one came back. So the soldiers were enraged, and they killed Chief Cornstalk, his companions, and his son. Cornstalk is said to have uttered a curse on the land in which he died. He spoke the following words: "I was the borderman's friend. Many times I have saved him and his people from harm. I never warred with you, but only to protect our wigwams and lands. I refuse to join your pale-faced enemies, the Redcoats. I came to the fort as your friend, and you murdered me. You have murdered by my side, my son. For this, may the curse of the Great Spirit rest upon this land. May it be blighted by nature, may even be blighted in its hopes. May the strength of its people be paralyzed by the stain of our blood." And that is how that story ends.
Well, that sounds like it could rip a hole through dimensions.
Yeah. And we've talked about the whole idea of casting spells and curses, and the way that they gain power is or the way that determines if it's a good thing or a bad thing is with the intent. And I think the whole intent of that one, I think we get it pretty quickly after the first paragraph of how he feels. It's almost like casting that like bad juju, that bad omen, bad what's the word that you, Brandon, you always say? Bad
I don't know, bad juju.
Yeah, let's just go keep it with bad juju until I can figure it out. But just that bad influence. Do you think that's strong enough to what? Bad juju.
Yeah, okay.
That's probably strong enough to rip a hole in dimensions, or if some beings look for an opportunity to cross over and find that that energy of negativity, that could draw something out.
It can just be like a little like beacon.
Yeah,
he invoked the Great Spirit. That's pretty serious.
Yeah. And in native culture, a lot of the spirits that they talk about are animal based.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Here, you guys keep talking real quick.
So our owl man or Mothman could be the product of this vengeful curse from Chief Comstock or Cornstalk. Sorry, Comstock, Cornstalk. Wow.
Yeah,
and what do you think about that, Brandon?
I like that.
Native American cultures see moths as messengers from the spirit world. They can symbolize transformation and healing.
Bro.
So in that aspect, if he's a person of transformation and healing,
He's all this.
Maybe,
The Mothman is also
Wait,
very dark, so it's like a dark moth, like so
wait,
opposite of that,
yeah,
perhaps.
yeah, wait a minute. So moths go towards the light,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and going towards the light is often the symbol for passing on to the next world.
hmm
Mm.
But if he's like a dark reflection, maybe he is like the Grim Reaper, and he like leads you to the shadow.
It's like
He leads you
the
to,
native Grim Reaper
yeah.
almost.
yeah, like he's leading you to the dark place. Or we could view it more positively. Maybe he is like leading you to the light, and
Yeah.
so that's why it's almost like a maybe it is more positive. Maybe it is like, well, he did curse this land, but there will be disasters. But these people, this is the being that will
Yeah.
shuttle them
No, yeah,
onward.
and like the idea of the positive sense of people always talk about like certain tragedies and whatnot. Angels were there to help or um whatever degree and whatnot. So the idea of like the healing aspect of it being a for there, it's like a little precursor of like I'm here to help the aftermath of what is about to happen. You
Yeah.
know.
And think about Injured Cold. Injured Cold said something very similar to what angels in the Bible would say. He said, "Be not afraid." You know,
Mm.
he wants peace.
Yeah.
So
And then we also got to think about it too, is that not everybody sees the Mothman. It's only select people that have seen him.
hmm
So are these select people, being saved? And maybe Mothman is not the harbinger of doom, like some people think. Maybe he's trying to warn people and save people from, going to these, different places.
Yeah.
Um,
Mitigating the tragedy.
yeah,
Interesting.
because if it was something that everybody saw, then there'd be no tragedy. But he's only being showing himself to certain people.
Hmm.
So it could be some sort of angelic figure,
How does everything always come back to the Native Americans?
Well, they're
Very
pretty much the
wise
basis
of
of
America.
our start of our culture in
Yeah.
here in the
Yeah.
United States.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, if it applies to things going on around here, you go to the source, and that's
It's
going to
true.
be it's going to be the tribes. It's going to be the Inca, the Maya. If you go farther south, and then if you go over to the east, it's the Egyptians, and
Mm-hmm.
before them, the Mesopotamians, and the ancient Chinese, like these kind of, uh, or the cradle of life in Africa. It's like these. You go to the source, you go to like the most ancient stuff, and you will find the primal point of everything, or close to.
And a lot of the stuff that that we're experiencing, they've experienced before. They just didn't have the words or the language to explain it, because it's like what we said with the whole aliens episode of like that what that one pastor said about the aliens being possibly angels, because there's that one passage saying that there's a tower of fire, and he's like, that could be a spaceship. They don't know that they came in on a spaceship. How would you explain that? The propulsion and the thrusters and everything like that. It's a tower of fire being shot out,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and they're coming from the sky, and they have wings. Maybe they didn't have wings. Maybe they just had propulsion suits that made them come down. Because we've talked about aliens being possibly us in the future, coming back to warn us about certain things happening. Maybe pretty Mothman like.
Well, one thing when it comes to the idea of like very old tellings of saying that certain things had wings, I feel like it very well could just be a translation like discrepancy, because the idea of something that flies, it has wings, so that kind of becomes
Yeah.
the same word or phrase to describe a bird. It's a thing with wings because it flies,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
then the word wing starts to mean something else, or vice versa. A
definitely.
flight and wing are the same thing, you know.
That's a huge rabbit hole when you go down to the Proto-Indo-European language roots. You go into some really weird, of course, for me, I study the of course, bringing up all the time the biblical stuff, but there's this part where it's like people say, Elohim can mean singular or it can mean plural. So why is this passage of the Judaic Bible talking about many gods? Okay, this is now it's all complicated, isn't
Mm.
it? You know,
Yeah, and then isn't there like some kind of passage talking about chariots of fire? You
hmm
know, how would they be able to explain like maybe cars or things
yeah.
Mm.
that have like some kind of propulsion on the thing? It's going to be a chariot because that's the closest thing they can
There's
describe.
there's a
And
couple prophets who get whisked up to heaven in the chariots of fire.
yep,
So, and they don't die a natural death. They just go straight to heaven, which is unheard of.
yeah,
Mm.
which could be just being whisked
Kolob.
to space. Ooh,
Yeah,
it's
going to
and
space and then being stranded in space as your
being
spaceship
probed,
comes back without you.
being probed.
Yeah.
So so the thing is like we're learning throughout, of course, all these different cryptids or you know beings or monsters or whatever you want to call them, is that they all have a similar source, similar root where they could be real. They could be projections of what we're trying to we're trying to understand something. They could be projections of what we understand and answers, which look at a couple thousand years ago, what we just talked about, the chariots of fire. We don't know how to explain these moth-like monsters or these like little green men or possibly this Sasquatch. Could these be just different, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Different kinds of beings that we have no way to describe.
No, yeah, because calling it the Mothman is simply because you're attributing it to something that you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And same with like Sasquatch or Bigfoot. He's an ape-like creature. Well, that's the only way we know how to explain a person that looks like that. They could be a creature from another dimension or a creature from a different civilization that got left behind millions of years ago, or with a chariots of fire or the tower of flame. We don't know that because this is the only way we can describe them. We don't have the language or the we've never talked with these people to understand what they want to be called.
Yeah.
So it just makes you think that even though we're more advanced than say we were at the biblical times, we still don't have the language to understand what these things could be.
Yeah, we classify them as unidentified flying objects. I know they have a different name now, but literally the
We stamp
name
that.
that got stamped was
Yeah.
we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's a
UAPs. Sorry, I should use the correct,
phenomenon. Yeah,
the
no,
correct
And, that,
word.
exactly.
UAP.
and like what Josiah was saying, and that's why we love true crime or mystery stories, because we're always trying to look for answers, always trying to solve everything, even though like some of the best movies, maybe there is no answers.
Mhm.
Maybe it's just something that we have to just let go and leave it unsolved.
Which I think is, from what I recall, what the Mothman Prophecies movie is about, essentially.
Yep.
Is like there is no resolution to the mystery. We never find out,
Nope.
what's going on with these entities, or we kind of have an idea of what their purpose was, but
Yeah.
that gives us no knowledge of what they were, and
Exactly.
you have to abandon that.
Yeah. And like it was almost what I got from the movie is almost like Richard Gere's was able to find his closure by being able to save someone that he couldn't save, or save someone unlike his wife who he couldn't save.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is the Hollywood version.
Did you guys ever see there's a different movie that I always think of whenever I think of the Mothman prophecies. I don't remember what it's called. It's got Kevin Costner in it. I'm pretty sure it has something
Oh,
butterfly.
Dragonfly?
Dragonfly, yeah.
I never saw that, but I remember that when it came out.
Did you ever see that, Josiah?
No
Yeah,
idea.
okay.
It had a similar story, I think, with the wife dying, and
Mhm.
he was trying to contact her or something like that,
He's
or
getting like man,
messages.
he's getting like messages or whatever, like through a spiritual kind of way, and he's able to like locate, because she got in like a car, like a bus wreck, in a like
That also
in an
came out in
Amazon.
2002.
Yeah, exactly. And
Huh.
then he's able to like locate because nobody knows like exactly what happened, and he's able to like locate and like find what happened to her and everything.
Dragonfly, Signs, and Mothman Prophecies all came out the same year, 2002.
That's wild.
What? And it's all the wife dies in every single one of those movies.
And it's all about the grief of letting go, and there's some kind of mystical. Because you guys heard that theory about Signs, right? That they're not aliens, they're demons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is why the holy water works on them.
Yeah.
I feel like that's almost text, but it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
But it is weird how all those movies came out the same year. That's crazy. I'll have to check
It
out.
was all about learning how to grief as a male.
Yeah.
Yeah, right after 9/11 too. So,
Yeah,
Makes
interesting.
sense.
I kind of want to watch this Dragonfly movie now.
Yeah.
Even though I
to check the trailer out or something.
No, yeah, let me read the description to you guys real quick. But no, the idea of like, yeah, these movies come out after 9/11 and whatnot. It's that circles back to the community like phenomenon, or just like this shared experience. Some might say shared psychosis,
Yeah.
which is like that's all around Mothman, and then that's all around 9/11 because that was a very like brought bunch of people together, and everybody kind of had like a very shared experience through that. But yeah, I don't know. That's just interesting.
we're all supposed to be grieved together through all this trilogy of films.
Dragonfly, Kevin Costner. A grieving doctor is being contacted by his deceased wife through her patient's near-death experiences. So yeah, that's right. They're having like these experiences and like telling the story, and there's a spiritual element to it, and he's putting like the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very similar.
Very, very similar.
Do we have any closing thoughts on the Mothman and Injured Cold?
I believe that we have an amalgamation, kind of a combining of the two of Jersey Devil and the Chupacabra. It almost, I don't want to say this, but it almost feels like it's like their way of bringing people to their city, and it's the one thing they're special for. You know, the Mothman could be something that was real at one point, but now he's gone. Been gone for so long, and they're just trying to capitalize on this.
Or the Mothman has yet to be.
Yeah.
Oh, so again, going off that pre-haunting thing.
Yeah.
The Mothman will be psychically created by all this, by the Mothman Festival, 10,000 people every year or whatever, and then he will appear. This is something interesting. Is like you mentioned, maybe he did exist. It's like how I talked about, like, what if that film of Bigfoot, that was the last Bigfoot that existed, and then it died, and that's why nobody else can get anything close to that level of, it's just like a theory.
Yeah.
So it's this thing about Mothman where maybe the Mothman popped out for just a little bit.
Yeah.
Into this dimension. Legit, he was there. We saw him. He was drawn to the bridge, and then he vanished shortly after. And then now there's like this idea of what if these things are real for but one moment, one encounter, and then they never appear again, but the energy or like the idea of them perpetuates, and people want it to still be real, because then miracles still exist, you know.
There's also one theory that we hadn't talked about though too.
Oh,
It's a quick theory.
go ahead.
Some people in the town believe that it was a prankster that would hide out in the munitions thing and pop out when people drove by, because there was people that had sightings of him coming from the munitions plant.
So
And
isn't he usually flying though? How is this prankster?
because sometimes he isn't flying, you could see him just standing there.
He's just like running.
There was a few reports where he was like on top of Lovers Lane's cars.
That's right.
and,
That's right. Yeah.
he could like.
And then
jump up
if
on
you go
top.
to the Chicago ones, you can see him like hovering from like third-story building, just staring into women's windows.
Mm.
And one of the women that saw him felt like she was like a bunny, she said, and going to be devoured by, I think, an eagle she used. That's how she felt.
Eagle Man.
Yeah. But then when her boyfriend came by, he quickly flew away. One last thing that I wanted to talk about too, I just remembered this by talking about that, is there's a lot of talk of when you look into Mothman's eyes that you lock with them in. There's a gaze, like, you can't break that gaze with Mothman. And everybody always talks about, eyes are the windows to the soul. Could that be something of maybe Mothman looking into you to see if you're a clean person? What do you guys think about that?
His eyes are red, so it's windows into the soul of hell. I don't know.
It's the Ghost Rider. It's the penance stare.
Yeah.
He will punish you if he senses evil in you.
Yeah, because I believe if I remember right, in the Mothman prophecies, there is like part of that in the movie as well, where like the one lady saw him standing underneath the tree, and she couldn't break the gaze with the Mothman.
Yeah.
And part of that is, we know that with predators and prey, like especially with deer, like there's that kind of freezing thing where the fight or flight is kicking in, but you're not sure what to do. So if you believe you're in the presence of something that is the apex predator in the situation, you might have that response where you instinctually lock eyes because you want to see what it's going to do.
Yeah.
You want to see if it's spotted you, what its view on you is. Or perhaps it is reading your soul. I mean, Indrid Cold was apparently telepathic, so.
Yeah, that's a good point. One little thing, the idea of the lady saying that it seemed like an eagle and she was going to be devoured, but then the boyfriend showed up. What that makes me think of is I don't know if it's necessarily true with eagles. It very well could be, but I know it's true with owls. They, as long as you're small enough and they think they can snatch you up and you look like a little animal, they will try. I think owls have tried to snatch up like little kids and snatch little dogs and cats and
human males. Yeah.
So
the owls are not what they seem.
Yeah. So it's just like, so that kind of tracks with the whole owl thing again.
Yeah.
But
she should be called Owlman instead of Mothman.
I'm telling you, 12-year-old me had it right. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. You were smarter than us now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was my closing thoughts before we go off on another tangent.
Yeah. It does seem that Mothman has a very spiritual element, a extraterrestrial, no, extra, just like supernatural, something not quite just some physical thing element, which is kind of the case with like all these cryptids. But definitely the case with Mothman, that's for sure. So it's definitely like there's just so many different possibilities with it. I think the dimension ideas are kind of fun. One thing that also kind of makes me think of, like, you know, just coming in just for like a second, all the different like multiverse whatever movies and whatnot. You see it in Rick and Morty, you see it in Strange and Doctor Strange and whatnot. When people are traveling through the different dimensions, they're always like, there's like the little montage scene where they go through these wacky ones just for a little bit, but then they just pass through. So it's like, was Mothman just passing through? You know, and maybe he's passed through more than once and stuff like that. He was never here to stay. He just passed through, you know.
So you're saying in essence he took the wrong turn at Albuquerque.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah, to come back, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is also interesting. I suppose we didn't really get into it too much with the whole Men in Black thing of they always follow up with that, which is definitely very alien and stuff. And when it comes to Mothman stuff, people don't really talk about like the idea of him being an alien all that much. You know, it is talked about, but as far as the phenomenon and like Mothman Festival stuff, it's not talked about all that much. But I do definitely think it's very interesting, and I kind of subscribe to a little bit of everything almost. And
Agreed.
If you recall my little video essay that I made about these cryptids being poltergeists, Mothman was a very prevalent character that was featured in that video where I talked about the Mothman Festival a little bit. So I kind of like gear towards that a little bit, but then again, like, I'm not 100% about any of these things. These are theories, you know. They're just very interesting. It's very interesting to talk about, but yeah, just the idea of a mass of people just contributing to this one thing, and then that's making actual things happen. I find that idea just very fascinating, and that's what I subscribe to the most when it comes to all the ideas.
You think since it was 60s when this started, 60s big hallucinogenic era of doing hallucinogenics, do you think that could be part of the Mothman?
Well, so here's another little thing when it comes to hallucinogenetics and all that is different dimensions, and people talking about they encountered these different beings and stuff like that, and talking about the same beings and stuff. So it's like, that's another side of all the world of different hallucinogens and whatnot is dimension travel and stuff like that. So kind of interesting.
You know, I think, Mothman, there's a lot of very interesting different ideas, different theories. I can see why this has continued to be a staple of the Mothman Festival, you know, this gathering of people. But yeah, you know, is it a coincidence that presumably, you know, as more and more people come to this festival, then all these sightings show up in Chicago for those years, and it seems like it's not slowing down. And it's funny because, you know, I feel in the West, we are a more cynical society, we are a more atheistic society, we are a more science-based society, and yet it seems as if people want to believe in something. We want to find something to believe in, and if that's Mothman, then so be it, you know. So it is rather interesting to me. And you know, please, if you have any thoughts about what you think Mothman could be, or who the mysterious Indrid Cold could be. There was this one wacky thing I couldn't find a source for that someone claimed there's like seven of his kind like roaming the earth or
Oh, the
something.
grinning men. Yeah,
The
I
grinning
remember
men.
reading something about multiple grinning men.
Yeah, so this goes deep,
Yeah.
but
Well,
please go ahead. Sorry.
I have one other thing that I
Oh,
just thought of that the 60s, all this different LSD experimentation and different hallucinogen experimentation. We were just talking about ripping a hole into dimensions. The idea of mass psychosis mixed with LSD of a lot of people on LSD. So it's like together they made a psychic thing which broke a hole, created a portal, whatever you want to do it. So it's like this mass psychosis on a whole nother level of coming together to create or to rip a hole into something.
just watch the movie Beyond the Black Rainbow. That's what I'll say to the audience. It's a lot about that. A lot about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, please let us know your Mothman Injured Cold theories. Please like and subscribe. We've been getting a lot more subscribers, and a few of our videos have been getting a good amount of views, and it's really good to see, that we appear to be getting some traction. And I don't monitor all the comments, but it seems like you guys are kind of flocking very slowly to what we're doing here. So that's very exciting.
Give us your energy.
Give us your energy, because we're all so tired.
Yeah.
But it is great to see, considering where we started. We're not nearly where I think we could reach. But I think it's good to be humble and say that we really appreciate all your guys' comments and views at this point, and just share us around, and please share topics that you want to be discussed, because we have a list, but as we go, we're knocking stuff off that list, and it's getting like, oh, what do you want to talk about this week? How about the Bloody Mary and the mirror dimension? That'll probably be next time. So until then, sleep well out there.
Bye.
Bye. Watch out for the Mothman.